service. So good morning to the YouTube channel, folks. Today is the 3rd of April, 2022, in case you're watching without seeing the label. And here on Magic Mountain, I'm excited to have, this is our third Sunday with the restrictions relieved from pandemic limitations on attendance at the Caron Chapel service. So we have not only patients, but alumni, family, and friends in our community here this morning, which is just a breath of fresh air, and it's springtime. The regular watchers on YouTube and those of you who have been a part of the chapel history, even for a couple weeks, know there is a topic rotation. And the topic for today is, usually these topics are one-word topics. The word is mercy. And I'd like to just share, it wasn't one of my original topics. When I took over for Father Bill sometime maybe 2015 and becoming the principal presider of the chapel service, I started developing a rotation of topics, and I think it was originally 15. I think I'm at 18. And mercy was one of the later additions. And it came from attending a conference in Pittsburgh, a pastoral care conference, where there was a woman who was a speaker. She was a nun. You don't see a lot of Roman Catholic religious women in this day and age. I think for a variety of reasons that kind of mode of service has declined in the present period. But I grew up as a Catholic kid, and especially overseas. I went to Catholic grade schools in Belgium, and the nuns ran the show. And so some part of me has a mix of fear and love of women who had given their lives in this particular way. So it's like, oh, this is interesting. And so this woman who was Sister whomever, somewhere in my notes what her name was, but she spoke about the topic of mercy, and I realized that my own theological journey had been Catholic kid, atheist, heathen, drug-addicted, frenetic hippie, and seeker, and then early sobriety atheist, and then I moved because of my recovery to explore faith, and I'm still exploring faith, but part of that exploration was to go to seminary. My third year of sobriety, I decided I was going to pursue a seminary path, and it took me 2 years to get into seminary and get out of what I was doing. So year 5 of my recovery, I went to seminary, and I'm still on a quest to explore the idea of a higher power. And I'm really grateful for all of that. But this particular seminary that I went to was Protestant in its heritage. And some of you know the differences between these different flavors. And then later I go to an interfaith seminary, I study different traditions. Anyway, the Protestant emphasis, at least in my experience, was less on mercy and more on grace. In seminary, I was taught all about grace, and I had to write papers about grace, and I had to explain how grace worked and its sequence, and the relationship between human beings and the divine was expressed, and then Cody's incredible singing there was bringing this classic song that is often associated with addiction recovery that has this amazing grace idea. So here I was in Pittsburgh hearing about mercy, and I was thinking, well, that's funny. I've never really done a deep dive theologically on the subject of mercy. Although, one of the things I did study in my lots of schooling about matters religious and spiritual was I studied ritual. And one of the places I studied ritual was in a Catholic university, actually Catholic University in Washington, D.C. And when I studied at Catholic U, one of the things that I studied very deeply was the Roman Catholic rite, the pattern, the model that they use in Sunday observance. And so I fancy myself, even as a little bit of an outsider of that tradition today, as a bit of an expert on it. And each Sunday, which we're going to do again this week, I include in the liturgy, that's the form of our worship, a thing called the Kyrie, which has the word mercy in it multiple times. It's and I don't know if you have a definition in mind for mercy, but words are slippery. I think they're hard to have fixed definitions for, other than maybe an apple. We sort of know what apples are, although they come in many forms, and An apple could be a computer or a fruit, right? So it gets messy quickly. But the first place that I go when I think about mercy as a term is as a plea, right? A cry, a plea for mercy. And maybe you've actually even thought that or said that, or in any case, I suspect most of us have had the yearning for what the word mercy sort of encapsulates, which is, it's so related to the idea of grace. So I think it's a desire to be treated graciously instead of punitively, right? To be looked on with favor instead of punishment or judgment. And so I think it's probably obvious why I think this plays really well in an addiction treatment environment, right? I think it's really easy to come here and feel like the eyes of scorn and scandal are upon you and us. I always include myself. I am a person in recovery, and I think even with long-term abstinence, I sometimes still feel the stigma leveled at me. Or I was just in a really interesting conversation last night with a family member who was talking about someone in their extended family who was suffering from addiction and was saying things that I wanted to get on my soapbox about like, well, they just haven't made the decision to stop. And it made me sad because I want to say to that person, I want to encourage them to have a more merciful and sensitive and caring and empathic. All those are words that attach to me this idea of mercy. And so there's a gentility that is implied in the word, and there's a yearning. What happened after I started studying that and thinking about how often we plead for mercy, maybe to a loved one or to a judge or to, some of you could be written up for misbehavior of rules on campus and plead for mercy, like smoking in the wrong place, whatever. So in tiny ways and in big ways, mercy can apply. Then I went studying and I started Googling Wikipedia articles and all that stuff and seeing what was written about mercy. And the first thing that comes up is a band. Then there's a variety of other references. It's funny how the Google algorithms make you realize that what you think will show up is not necessarily the first thing. So I had to drill down a little bit to find the theological category of mercy. And the particular article that I tripped on was one that, again, was in this very specific Catholic subset of the Christian traditions, in which mercy is described as a set of works. So mercy, there's spiritual and practical forms of mercy in that particular tradition. That caught me off guard. I wasn't expecting to think of mercy as actions. But then the actions, when I looked at them, I was like, oh, I love these actions, and they are very important to me in my faith. So the actions were these classic actions of what I think of as ministry, like what I think of as not only when I wear a stole, what putting on a stole means to me, and I think my predecessor, Father Bill, thought about, but it is, so visiting the sick, giving comfort to the afflicted, setting at liberty those who are oppressed. And there are some classic things in both Jewish and Christian writings that are signs of when the divine is at work in the world. And those kind of things, the blind see, the lame walk, the prisoner is set free, and justice rolls down like water, and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. These it's like springtime kind of events where misery is lifted and joy and love and peace and harmony are found. And so all of a sudden I'm like, wow, it's a whole different way of thinking about mercy. Is I can think about mercy as action. I can think about mercy as something I could do rather than something I want to ask to receive. And it's an interesting flip of the script, right? Like all of a sudden I have, now I'm like, oh, I could take an inventory and accountability. I'm like, if I'm asking for mercy, have I been merciful? And I have very concrete ways of thinking about it. I'm reminded in the Christian typical prayer of the Lord's Prayer, which people often struggle with a great deal, but there is this forgive as we are forgiven equation. And similarly, I would say I might be on weak ground if I'm asking for mercy and I've been unmerciful, right? So, and I could imagine, like if I'm in front of a judge and I'm like, Lord, Your Honor, please have mercy on me. The judge sort of saying, I don't know, I just heard from the prosecuting attorney, you haven't been terribly merciful to, other people. So, this idea of reciprocity and of personal, this is a thing I can do. And I think where recovery talks a lot about powerlessness and often becoming a patient or a client in a treatment center, it can feel like you lose a sense of agency and don't know where you can, what can I do? Well, this moves us in a category of potency and of a set of things that we can do. We can be liberators of those who are oppressed. We can visit the sick. We can comfort the afflicted, and we can raise people up, and we can be servants, and we can minister to one another. When I was pursuing this wild shift from secular atheist to ordained minister, I had a lot of education I had to do, but I also had papers I had to write. And I remember there was a point at which I had to, in order to try and be certified as a chaplain, it was like the third time I had to do these big manifestos of papers because I had already become ordained, but then I was trying to be an endorsed chaplain. And I remember I was like, I've written essays like this before, but anyway, the basic essay question I was asked to answer was, what is your understanding of ministry? And I remember writing the first sentence of that essay a number of years into my work was, ministry is service, period. And I remember that because I went before this board of like 40 chaplains, and it was like a review board, and I was one of 25 or 30 candidates that wanted to become endorsed in this thing. And they had fun with each other because apparently that was the key thing they wanted candidates to express. And they were like, so there was a guy on the board, I don't know what his name was, but let's say his name was Howard, and they were like, hey Howard, did you read Jack's essay? And Howard's like, I read it. And they were like, how about that? First 3 words, he checks the box, right? So understanding that at the very essence of it, I don't think I understood that when I went to seminary and pursued call. I don't think I really got that. But people like Father Bill, and then my mother, who I remember this time when my mother, she had insight into this. She came from this family where there had been priests and there had been like a legacy of service, and she, I think I said something about pursuing this that didn't convey the sense of commitment and obligation over the course of my life to servanthood. And I remember she flared and she was like, if you don't get that that's what this is about, you shouldn't do it. So anyway, I'm not suggesting that everybody goes to seminary and wears stoles, but I will say in the recovery tradition, this is on topic. One of my predecessors here, besides Father Bill, was a guy named Father Mark Hyper. And when Mark was here, he used to close the chapel service in order to have a sense of participation in the service. He had several minutes at the end of the service that I was told maybe when I got here I should watch Father Mark do it and then emulate him. What I learned when I came here is I can't be Father Bill and I couldn't be Mark. Each of them had their own thing. But anyway, Mark's gig, and I can call him Mark today because he's no longer a Catholic priest. He's happily married and still working in a kind of a chaplaincy role, but he's no longer ordained in that tradition. Super, super guy. But Mark's tagline was love and service, baby. And it was for him an encapsulation of what he believed the 12-step journey would take us towards. out of what NA calls the buying and using and getting ways and means to get more, which is addiction in its essence. But if I stop doing that, if I stop buying and using and finding ways and means to get more, if that's like the day-to-day rat race of my life, what is it that replaces that? Love and service. Acts of mercy. A couple other things to say, and then I'll be quiet, because I really enjoyed last week's service, and I want to make sure I leave a chunk of time for more sharing, is the 12-step model for addiction recovery, which is the oldest one that we know is substantially effective. There are other models out there today. Some of them I think are especially interesting to me. Some of them might be more interesting to you. But the 12-step model is like the aspirin of the group, or the penicillin of the group, or the Prozac of the group, to use medication analogies. And today there are all kinds of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories and all kinds of SSRIs and all kinds of medications in these different categories. But there is a first one that you would learn about. The 12-step model describes itself as a program of action. And what kind of action? Well, inventory, daily prayer and meditation. So those are not necessarily in and of themselves merciful acts. But amends, that's the reconciliation of ourselves with people who have harmed. And then culmination of the 12th step of assistance to others, especially who are seeking to find their way on their journey of recovery themselves. So I think I'm way off of talking about mercy as the nun did in Pittsburgh, but now she comes back to my mind, I'll say what she said that so caught my imagination was that she understood mercy as where suffering meets love. I think that's a beautiful thing. And I think this is a place where suffering meets love. I think every AA meeting, every NA meeting, every recovery Dharma meeting, every smart recovery, all those places, every hospital, every chaplaincy, the essence of these ministry moments are suffering, encountering love, instead of punishment or judgment or hate or scorn or scandal. And I don't know if that makes you feel some sense of like, oh, relief, but I do believe it would be warranted for you to feel a sense of relief. Because I will tell you, I think that people go to treatment centers and don't get love. They get scorn, scandal, and rebuke. The old days of addiction treatment were kind of like, my sponsor has been sober for 55 years. I think he just celebrated day after St. Patty's Day, good Irishman. And he tells me that when he was getting sober, they were very direct. Sit down, shut up, take the cotton out of your ears and put it in your mouth. It was a very, very confrontational and direct and kind of shame-rich sort of approach that a lot of people recoiled from. Some people did get sober in that environment, but I think today many of us who work in this field of medicine have come to realize that those kind of really harsh statements and the demeaning of our clients is a terribly risky way of trying to bring love. And that's not going to work for the large majority of people. And that our task and our call and our purpose. Another thing I will say about this place in Magic Mountain, why is Magic Mountain called Magic Mountain, and what distinguishes this place from other places? When I first started working here in 2008, I did some visits of other places, and I went to this one very, very well-reputation treatment provider. I won't name it, but I was really kind of excited to go there. And I wandered around the halls I even had a visitor name badge, and I was there for a whole week of observation. I watched their spiritual care, I attended their lectures, I met a bunch of their patients. And what shocked me was people not greeting me in the hallway, and people not there was a missing element of hospitality. Because what I experience when I walk around here is that you can't walk down the hall and not know somebody and have somebody not say at least good morning and hey and how are you. That this is an environment of love. And my predecessor, Father Bill, used to say, we will love you until you can love yourself. And I deeply believe that. And so, did you come today pleading for mercy in your soul? If you did, I get it. I plead for mercy every day. We'll pray for mercy here in a minute. I think we all would benefit from it. And the invitation I would put in front of all of us is, the question I have for myself is, have I been merciful? And how could I be merciful? How could I be the agent that brings the mercy that somebody else is praying for?